use these videos to sleep. So before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case, right? Let's get comfy and relax. And let's begin story 1. This story took place in Happy Valley, located in the southern part of Wan Chai district on Hong Kong Island. The main character of the story is Pin Yaking, a 16-year-old girl who was the sixth of 8 siblings. Her family didn't live in Happy Valley, but in the Long Wan on the eastern part of Hong Kong Island. Pin Ying's parents ran a fish shop nearby, and her brother was studying at the University of Hong Kong. Pin Yaking attended X and FA Middle School, where her younger brother Pin Jingming later studied. Due to poor academic performance, she transferred to Ching Evening English College in Causeway Bay for her N9th grade studies. Classes there began at 7 p.m. and ended at 9 p.m. Pin Yaking occasionally helped her parents at their fish shop during the day. She would leave home at 6 p.m. to take the tram to Causeway Bay for evening school. She would typically return home around 10 p.m. as Christmas approached. Her school was planning a prom night. After class, Pin Yaking needed to stay behind to rehearse a play with her classmates, which meant she would return home later than usual. One day, Pin Yaking left home to attend her evening class just like any other day. However, she never returned. On Monday, December 16th, 1974, despite the cool weather outside, Pin Yaking still decided to go to her evening class in Causeway Bay at 5 p.m. Pin Yaking changed her clothes and left home. She left an hour earlier than usual. By 6 p.m. Pin Yaking called her close friend Chin Bing Bing, a former classmate from Sheena School. The two were very close and often went to the movies and shopping together. Although Pin Yaking had transferred schools, she stayed in touch with her old friends. This time, Pin Yaking called Chin Bing Bing to ask her to return a pop music cassette tape that Chin had borrowed earlier. During the call, they agreed to meet at the Happy Valley tram station in half an hour. Chun Bing Bing lived on Sing Kwong Road in Happy Valley, which was very close to the tram station. By 6:30 p.m. Chin Bing Bing arrived at the tram station with the cassette tape, but Pin Yaking was nowhere to be seen. She waited there for a while, but by 7 o'clock p.m. Pin Yaking still hadn't shown up. Since Pin Yaking had a habit of canceling plans in the past, Chin Bing Bing thought her friend probably wouldn't show up this time either, so she decided to head back home. That night, Pin Ying's parents were busy working at their fish shop until late. When they returned home, they were surprised to see that their daughter hadn't come back. Yet, remembering that the school was rehearsing for a play, they called her classmates, but the response they received was unsettling. Pin Yaking had not attended school that evening, nor had she participated in the play rehearsal. No one knew where she was the night past, and the next morning a sanitation worker began his usual cleaning routine at the Happy Valley tram station. The station was located on Wong Nach Chung Road, surrounded by tall buildings and shops. The worker had to make sure the streets were clean before the businesses opened for the day. When the worker reached the front of a veterinary clinic at 212 and 213 Wong Nach Chung Road, he noticed a large cardboard box tied with rope placed in front of the clinic. The box was about 35 in long and 24 in wide. Finding it odd that such a large box was left in front of the clinic, the worker tried to push it, but it didn't move. Thinking it might belong to the clinic, he decided not to pay it much attention. By a little after 8 a.m., as the veterinary clinic was about to open, an employee arrived at the clinic. He also noticed the cardboard box, but since it didn't belong to the clinic and was blocking the entrance, it was causing an obstruction to their business. The employee tried to move the box but found it too heavy to lift on his own. He called a colleague for help, and together they carried the box to the side of the road, not too far from the clinic. 2 hours later, a police officer was patrolling Wong Nach Chung Road. When he approached the front of the veterinary clinic, he saw the cardboard box on the sidewalk obstructing traffic. The officer asked around, but no one claimed ownership of it. He then used scissors to cut the rope and open the box. What he didn't expect was to find the naked body of a woman inside, wrapped in newspapers. Shocked by the discovery, the officer immediately used his radio to report the incident to the command center. Since it was rush hour, there were many people passing by. A curious crowd quickly gathered to see what was happening. Not long after backup police units arrived at the scene, they cordoned off the area and began their investigation. Inside the box was the body of a young woman, completely nude, with her arms tightly curled around her body. The only items found in the box were a few old newspapers and no clothing or personal belongings of the victim were discovered. Forensic experts found traces of copper fragments on the body, a piece of red adhesive tape in her hair, and some paint particles on her elbows. A small white piece of paper stuck to her elbow. had 2 words written on it due to damage. It was possible that the victim had been in a repair shop for electrical appliances. Before her death, police also found some fabric fibers under the victim's fingernails, possibly from contact with the perpetrator's clothing the box containing. The woman's body was 35 in long, 24 in wide, and 24 in high. It had originally been used to store a Hitachi television. There were several fingerprints left on the box, but all the individuals linked to those prints were cleared of suspicion. The autopsy revealed that the victim had numerous bruises on her body, suggesting she may have been tortured before death, but there were no signs of sexual assault. Her breasts were removed post-mortem, and her pubic hair had been burned with a hot object. Based on the food remnants found in her stomach, it was determined that the victim had eaten. Within 3 hours prior to her death, according to the findings, the victim had been placed inside the box approximately 12 hours after she died. The cause of death was asphyxiation due to manual strangulation with the perpetrator's right hand. The estimated time of death was between 6 p.m. on December 16th and the early hours of the following morning. The police checked the recent missing persons reports, but found no matches. They then released images and information about the victim to the media, hoping the public could provide clues. Meanwhile, Payak Ying's family was desperately searching for her. By chance, they came across news of the girl in the box case in the newspaper. Seeing the victim's portrait, they noticed a striking resemblance to Pinak Yin and feared the worst. 2 days after puking disappeared, her family went to the police station to identify the body. The victim in the cardboard box was quickly confirmed to be 16-year-old Peking. Once the victim's identity was confirmed, the Hong Kong police immediately set up a special task force led by the famous detective known for his bald head. Investigators began tracing Pinak Ying's movements before her death, starting by questioning her younger brother, who was the last person to speak with her, and her classmate Chin Bingbing. Pinak Ying's younger brother Pining Ming reported that on the day of the incident, he had returned home earlier than usual. After finishing his exams, his sister Peking had already prepared lunch, and the two of them ate together around 4 p.m. Peking received a phone call about 7 minutes later. She received another call, both lasting about 2 to 3 minutes. Peking then told her brother that before going to her evening class, she would stop by a newspaper office in North Point to help her older brother post an advertisement, and that she would be leaving the house at 5 p.m. instead of her usual 6 p.m. However, upon investigation, the newspaper office in North Point reported that they had not received any advertising request from Peking. Additionally, the office had closed at 5 p.m. that day, the same time Peking had just left her house. As for Chin Bingbing, she told the police that she had known Peking for 4 years, having met her at Shina School. Even after they attended different schools, they remained in touch. 6 months earlier, while out shopping together, Peking had bought a pop music cassette tape which Chin Bingbing later borrowed. On the afternoon of the incident, Payakin called Chin Bingbing asking her to return the cassette tape. They agreed to meet at the Happy Valley tram station. Chin Bingbing arrived at the agreed time, but by 7 p.m. there was still no sign of puking, so she decided to leave. She also added that puking often arrived late or canceled plans. They had arranged to meet at the Happy Valley tram station multiple times before, and puking had failed to show up 4 or 5 times already, so this time Chin Bingbing didn't think much of it and assumed her friend had canceled again. Interestingly, when Chin Bingbing recalled their conversation, she remembered that there was a lot of background noise where Pining was, and her voice sounded hurried and anxious. Sensing that her friend was in a rush, Chin Bingbing quickly grabbed the cassette tape and headed to the TRA station, never imagining that something terrible would happen to Payak. And next, the police went to Dang Evening English College in Causeway Bay, where Puking was studying, to investigate. The police asked the teacher for the attendance record from the night of the incident, but the teacher reported that the list had gone missing. The teacher added that the day after Pin Yucking disappeared, her family had visited the school to inquire about her. At that time, the teacher checked the attendance list and noticed that Peking had not attended class that evening. He then set the list aside, but strangely, when he later went to look for it, the attendance record had vanished. The police continued gathering information from Payak Ying's classmates. They described her as an energetic and cheerful girl with a particular love for ice cream. She had never had a boyfriend, and her parents were very strict, so she rarely interacted with boys. Peking had a strong passion for acting and was planning to participate in a Christmas performance. She and her classmates had been rehearsing after school many times, and she had never missed a session. The day of the incident was the only time she didn't show up. Payak Ying's family confirmed what her classmates had said. They added that she didn't like associating with male classmates. However, there was a boy from Taiwan, a fellow student, who had pursued her, but Pining rejected him. Afterward, the boy started spreading false rumors about her at school. One of the rumors claimed that Payak Ying's family was involved with organized crime. Some students believed the rumors and were too afraid to get close to her. Later, Payak Ying's older sister went to school to talk to the boy from Taiwan. After investigating the situation, the police considered the boy a possible suspect and searched for him to get a statement. However, after Payak Ying's murder, the boy had seemingly disappeared. Sometime later, the police located him, but he provided an alibi, proving he wasn't the one who killed Peking. At first, the police were almost certain that the boy was the culprit and believed the case was about to be solved. But now this lead had gone cold, leaving the case at a standstill. They turned their investigation toward the cardboard box that contained Payak Ying's body. According to their investigation, the box was originally used to package a Hitachi 17 inches TV model S67B. This particular TV model had been sold in Hong Kong for 2 years prior to the incident. A dealer on Kesu Road in Cowan was the exclusive distributor of this TV model in Hong Kong. The company's manager informed the police that in the last 3 months, they had sold a total of 300 units of the S67B model. However, the company didn't sell directly to customers, but through 72 second-tier dealers across the region. This made tracking the origin of the box extremely difficult. The police followed the lead from the TV, tracking down hundreds of buyers and asking where they had disposed of the TV box. However, no one admitted to dumping the box on Wong Nich Chung Road. At this point, the head of the special investigation team refocused on the cardboard box. He noted that the box was originally designed to hold a TV, but the perpetrator used it to contain a body, which would make it extremely heavy. It would be difficult for one person to move the box, and if they tried, the box would likely become deformed or even damaged. However, this particular box was tied with a rope at the bottom for support, showing signs of light dragging, but overall it remained intact and in fairly good condition. The inspector then asked team members to recreate the crime scene. A female officer with a similar build to Pin Yucking lay inside the box in the same position as the victim was found. Through the experiment, they discovered that the box with a person inside was too heavy for one person to carry and would require 2 people. However, if 2 people were to lift it, the box would become significantly deformed during the process and could not be moved a long distance. So how did the perpetrator manage to transport the box with the body to Wong Nich Chung Road? To clarify this, the police examined 50 popular car models on the market at the time. The results showed that neither the back seats nor the trunks of any of these vehicles could fit the 17 inches TV box. It's possible that the perpetrator used a truck to transport the box to Wong Nich Chung Road, but the police thought this was unlikely. Happy Valley is a densely populated area, and a truck would attract attention. Additionally, unloading items from a truck would raise suspicion. However, there were no reports of any suspicious trucks seen in the area on the day of the incident. Furthermore, if the perpetrator had used a truck, they could easily have transported the box to a remote area outside the city, making it harder to detect. After further consideration, the bald-headed inspector suddenly had an idea. The initial crime scene might not have been elsewhere, but was actually in Happy Valley, where the body was found. In combination with the discovery of copper fragments on the victim body, investigators conducted a thorough search of all factories and electrical repair workshops in the Happy Valley area. They also interviewed nearly 750 electricians. However, they did not uncover any suspicious leads. As time passed, it was nearing the end of December, about 20 days after the crime. While conducting field investigations, a police officer accidentally stumbled upon an important clue. He noticed a large number of technical devices and cardboard boxes in the attic of an ice cream shop resembling a small workshop. The ice cream shop, named in May, was not only located on Wong Nai Chung Road in Happy Valley, but it was also right next to the veterinary clinic where Pin Yucky Ying's body was found. Remembering that Pin Yucky Ying's classmate had mentioned she loved ice cream, the officer had a hunch that there might be suspicious about this ice cream shop. He immediately reported his findings and suspicions to his superiors. 2 weeks after the incident, the police obtained a warrant and went to an May ice cream shop to investigate. The shop was primarily divided into 3 areas: the front section, where ice cream was sold to customers; the back area used for repairing vending machines; and the attic, where tools and miscellaneous items were stored. There was also a phone line installed in the attic. Upon careful inspection, the police found copper wires, red adhesive tape, paint, cardboard boxes, newspapers, a welding machine, and other items in the attic. These items were in some way connected to Pin Yucking. The manager of a May ice cream shop stated, That the items stored in the attic were mainly used to repair the shop's vending machines. The newspapers were purchased by the shop, and after everyone finished reading them, they were stacked neatly and periodically collected for recycling. While there were cardboard boxes in the attic, they were all small boxes, and none were large enough to fit a TV. The manager then provided the police with the employee shift schedule for the night of the crime. According to the schedule, the only employee working that evening was a man named Oh Young Ping Kong. During the police search, Oh Young appeared visibly anxious and tense, his facial muscles twitching from the moment they entered the shop. The sharp-eyed officers had taken note of his behavior and quietly observed him. Their instincts told them they were on to something this time. The next day, the police brought Oh Young in for questioning. During the interrogation, the police used various coercive tactics, such as pouring soda into his nose and brutally beating him. However, Oh Young Ping Kong maintained that he did not know Pin Yaking and could not have killed her. Since there was no additional evidence, the police were forced to release him. The forensics team conducted an analysis of the evidence collected from the ice cream shop. The results showed that the copper fragments, paint, and red adhesive tape were the same types as those found on the victim's body. The newspaper from the ice cream shop was also the same issue, used to wrap the body. The small white note with the words "due to damage" found on the victim's elbow matched a note with the words "repaired" found in the attic. The police then searched the home of the suspect, Oh Young Ping Kong, and confiscated 3 sets of clothing. The forensic results confirmed that the fabric fibers found under Pin Yu Ying's nails matched Oh Yu Young's suit. Additionally, 2 green wool fibers of unknown origin found on his suit matched the green wool fibers found on Pin Yukin's body. Based on the evidence gathered, the police developed a theory. On the afternoon of the crime, after leaving her home, Pin Yuking went to the newspaper office in North Point to help her brother place an advertisement. When she arrived, she found the office was closed, so she left and was preparing to head to her evening school. With extra time on her hands, Pin Yuking wandered the streets alone. When she reached Wang Na Chung Road, she noticed an ice cream shop called In Mei. Since she loved ice cream, she decided to stop in. After buying her ice cream, Pin Yuking suddenly remembered that her close friend Chin Bing Bing lived nearby also. In the Happy Valley area that evening, a young Ping Kong was working at a Mei ice cream shop. Pin Yuking asked if there was a phone in the shop. A young Ping Kong led her upstairs to the attic to make the call. The phone call that Pin Yuking made to her friend Chin Bing Bing was from a Mei ice cream shop. At that time, no one else was in the shop, and Oh Young began harboring ill intentions. Pin Yuking fought back fiercely and tried to escape. Oh Young then strangled her from behind with his right hand. Due to excessive force, Pin Yuking was strangled to death. Realizing he had committed a crime but still needing to attend to customers since the shop was open, Oh Young hid the body in the attic and continued to serve customers. Once the shop closed, he locked the front door and returned to the attic. He undressed Pin Yuking, burned her pubic hair with a hot object, and cut off her breasts in an attempt to mislead the police, making them think the murderer was a psychopath or mentally unstable. He then found a large cardboard TV box nearby and stuffed Pin Yuking's body inside. Since the box was too heavy and dragging it would leave marks on the bottom, Oh Young decided to dump it in front of the veterinary clinic next door. He thought the most dangerous place is the safest place. This tactic was indeed clever. Initially, the police had no suspicion that the killer was right in front of them. However, Oh Young left too many clues behind and ultimately could not escape justice. The suspect, Oh Young Ping Kong, 28 years old, lived in San, Hong Kong. He worked as an office clerk at a factory on Wong Gong Road. Both of his parents had passed away and his financial situation was not well off. Oh Young Ping Kong met his wife Zhang Jin Fong in 1972, 2 years before the crime took place. After a year of dating, the two got married. Their relationship was strong, and they had a daughter. In the year of the crime, his wife was pregnant with their second child, a son. To earn extra income to cover living expenses, Oh Young Ping Kong started working part-time in the evenings at a Mei ice cream shop for months before the crime. According to the shop's policy, employees were allowed 1 day off per week, but in order to make more money, Oh Young worked. Even on his days off, Oh Young's life was quite busy. Every day, he would work at the factory in Kaitong starting at 8 a.m. After finishing his shift at 5 p.m., he would head straight to a Mei ice cream shop, usually arriving around 5:40 p.m. At this time, the daytime staff were still finishing their shifts. Oh Young's shift was from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., but because there was a lot of work at the ice cream shop, he typically didn't return home until 11 p.m. Sometimes his wife would prepare dinner for him, and other times the couple would go out to eat together. The police interviewed Oh Young's wife, who confirmed that her husband came home around 11 p.m. as usual and didn't show any unusual behavior. That night they stayed in and didn't go out. She described her husband Band as a hard-working man with ambition. The neighbors also said that Oh Young was polite and soft-spoken, always greeting people courteously. The police then returned to Inmay ice cream shop to continue their investigation. According to the timekeeping records from the day of the crime, Oh Young arrived at the shop at 5:40 p.m. and finished his shift at 10:30 p.m. Just like on any other day, the ice cream shop's manager explained that to enter the shop one must pass through 3 doors. The outermost door was a rolling metal gate followed by a smaller door only wide enough for one person, and the innermost door was made of wood. The ice cream shop had a total of 16 employees, but only 3 people had keys to all 3 doors, including Oh Young. On January 3, 1975, 3 months after the crime, Oh Young was officially arrested on suspicion of murder. 6 months later, Oh Young Ping Kong's trial began at the Hong Kong High Court. The jury consisted of 5 men and 2 women. Throughout the trial, Oh Young maintained his innocence and denied all charges. At the trial, the prosecution presented over 200 pieces of evidence. They argued that the proximity of the ice cream shop to the veterinary clinic was ideal for the perpetrator to commit the crime and dispose of the body. Additionally, the fibers found under the victim's nails matched the fibers on Oh Young's suit. Identical green wool fibers were found on Ping Yuying's body at Ami ice cream shop and in Oh Young's home. Furthermore, the copper fragments, scraps of paper, and paint found on Ping Yucking matched the materials found in the attic of Ami ice cream shop. Lastly, according to the shop's timekeeping records, Oh Young was the only one working at Ami ice cream shop on the night of the crime. He had keys to all 3 of the shop's doors, giving him the opportunity and time to commit the crime. The police used a mannequin to demonstrate how the perpetrator could have stuffed the body into the cardboard box and dragged it to the disposal site. They also simulated how the perpetrator strangled Ping Yucking from behind. The prosecution called 15 witnesses to testify. One of them, a 19-year-old woman, stated that she worked at a factory in Saipo Kong. On her way to work in Kong, Oh Young had twice burned her dress with a cigarette, but psychologists testified that this act was a form of sexual deviance. The prosecution pointed out that the victim's pubic hair had been burned, linking this to similar deviant behavior. Oh Young's defense maintained his innocence. His lawyer argued that Oh Young and his wife had a loving relationship. He had a stable job, and he didn't know Ping Yaking, so there was no clear motive for the murder. Furthermore, out of the 269 fibers found on Ping Yuying's body, only 7 matched the suit Oh Young wore to work. Additionally, the medical examiner initially concluded that Ping Yuying's time of death was between 9 p.m. and midnight on the night of the crime, but later changed it to between 6 p.m. and midnight. This raised suspicions of a deliberate alteration of the time of death to match Oh Young's work schedule. Lastly, no fingerprints found on the cardboard box matched Oh Young's. The disappearance of the class attendance sheet and the 2 phone calls Ping Yucking received before she went missing were also suspicious, yet the police had not fully investigated these aspects. Oh Young stated that Ami ice cream shop did not allow customers to make phone calls to avoid unnecessary trouble. The attic window at Ami did not face the street, so the environment there was very quiet, which contradicted the testimony of Chin Bing Bing, who said that when she spoke with Ping Yucking on the phone, the background noise was loud. On the day of the incident, Ping Yucking had never been to the ice cream shop. Oh Young also mentioned that he was only a part-time employee, so he rarely went up to the attic, only once or twice to retrieve tools for machine repairs. He had never used the welding machine, so he couldn't have used it to burn the victim's pubic hair. The work at the ice cream shop was very busy, and Oh Young had to handle multiple tasks by himself, such as serving customers, handling payments, cleaning the shop, etc. He usually didn't finish his shift until after 10 p.m. He claimed he had no time to search for a cardboard box or dispose of the body. After hearing arguments from both the prosecution and the defense, the 7-member jury, 5 men and 2 women, reached a verdict after 18 days of trial. The Hong Kong High Court declared Oh Young guilty of murder and sentenced him to death. This case became the first in Hong Kong to be solved using scientific evidence. After the trial, Oh Young continued to maintain his innocence. He began a hunger strike in prison to prove his purity, stating that he had never done anything against his conscience and did not deserve such punishment. Oh Young's wife, Jiang Jin Fong, also believed in her husband's innocence. She sought help from various lawyers, and a prominent lawyer at the time, Lin Tawa, presented 8 reasons to appeal the case in the Apic Court. In March 1976, over a year after the crime occurred, the defense's efforts paid off. The appellate court overturned the original verdict and ordered a retrial. 2 months later, the Hong Kong High Court reopened the case of the body in the cardboard box in Happy Valley. This time the jury consisted of 7 men, and 2 women. The defense invited renowned lawyer, Hu Hanli, to represent Oh Yu-young. After deliberation, the jury still concluded that Oh Yu-young was guilty of murder once. Again, Oh Yu-young was sentenced to death. He appealed to both the Court of Appeal and the Privy Council in the United Kingdom, but his appeals were rejected, and the death sentence was upheld in 1977, more than 2 years after the crime. After considering opinions from various parties, Hong Kong Governor Mlehos decided to grant clemency, commuting Oh Young-ping's death sentence to life imprisonment by 1981, 7 years after the crime. Oh Yu-young had served 6 years in prison. During his imprisonment, he displayed exemplary behavior, even teaching Braille to blind inmates and becoming a model prisoner. However, multiple requests for clemency were denied on the grounds that Oh Young had not shown genuine remorse. In reality, Oh Young wasn't without regret. He simply continued to insist that he had not killed Pin Yaking. That same year, Zhang Jinfang filed for divorce from Meng. She took their daughter, and the 2 of them lived together, relying on each other. In 1990, 16 years after the crime, Oh Young finally admitted to killing Pin Yaking and recounted the details of the crime. In 2002, 28 years after the crime, Oh Young was granted clemency and released from prison. After his release, in an interview with the media, Oh Young maintained that he was innocent and had not committed the murder. He claimed that his confession in prison was made under duress, as it was the only way people would believe he had truly repented, giving him a chance to be released. Regarding the body in the cardboard box in Happy Valley case, some believe that Oh Yu-young had no motive to kill. There were no eyewitnesses and no fingerprints linked him to the crime. These pieces of evidence, they argue, were insufficient to convict him, and it's entirely possible that Oh Young was wrongfully convicted. However, others argue that while there was no strong direct evidence, the accumulation of circumstantial evidence formed a closed loop that was unlikely to be mere coincidence. They believe Oh Young was indeed responsible for Pin Ying's death. After nearly 35 years in prison, Oh Young-ping Kung changed his name and started a new life. As for the truth of the case from all those years ago, perhaps only he knows the full story. The case closed with many unresolved mysteries, leaving the people of Hong Kong in shock and with a lingering sense of unease. Whatever the truth, maybe there are those who believe that somewhere in a hidden corner of this city, the spirit of the young schoolgirl still wanders, waiting for answers. And True Peace Story 2. On November 22, 1999, the Penal Police Department in San Francisco, California, received an emergency call. The caller was Raymond Wong, a 28-year-old Chinese-American man who reported his girlfriend missing. With deep concern, the missing person was Alice Sin, who was not only his living girlfriend, but also the mother of their child, not yet a year old. According to Raymond's statement, Alice had followed her usual routine the day before and driven the family's Toyota to the community college for classes. However, she had not returned home. Since then, this devastating news was made even more heartbreaking, as Thanksgiving, a time of joyful family reunions, was just 2 days away. Immediately after receiving the report, the police launched an investigation. They interviewed Alice's parents and close friends, but no one knew her whereabouts. Notably, a friend shared that Alice deeply loved her son. With the child's first birthday just days away, it was inconceivable that Alice would miss this important occasion unless something unfortunate had happened. The concern intensified further when Alice's parents revealed that she was 4 months pregnant. While the police were actively posting missing person flyers around the neighborhoods, a crucial lead emerged. On November 24th, they discovered that on November 21st, the day Alice went missing, she had stopped by a bakery in the local shopping mall to order a birthday cake for her son. Without delay, the police rushed to the shopping mall and quickly located Alice's Toyota still parked in the lot. They thoroughly inspected the vehicle and reviewed the surveillance footage in the area, but did not find anything suspicious. The police suspected that Alice had encountered trouble and did not rule out the possibility of abduction. Therefore, they decided to interview Raymond, Alice's boyfriend, to gather more information. When the police arrived at Raymond's apartment and rang the doorbell, they were confronted with an unexpected scene. The person who answered the door was a Chinese woman named Jessica Tang, and it was noteworthy that she was displaying intimate gestures with Raymond inside the apartment. This raised the investigator's suspicions. How could Raymond already be living with another woman just 3 days after Alice's disappearance? However, when questioned by the police, Raymond was quite forthright. He did not evade the inquiries and proactively disclosed the complex relationship between the three of them. According to him, Jessica was also his girlfriend, and Alice was fully aware of this. This information further perplexed the investigators and compelled them to delve deeper. The story became even more unbelievable when Raymond admitted to maintaining a long-term polyamorous relationship with both women. He claimed that Alice and Jessica were not only aware of each other's existence but also accepted this three-way relationship living together harmoniously. Even more shocking was the revelation that both women had borne children for Raymond with Jessica's newborn daughter. The entire story sounded so irrational and unbelievable, but Raymond recounted it in a remarkably calm manner. According to him, this was a mutually fulfilling, multifaceted relationship where both women devoted their love to him, and the three of them coexisted in harmony. Raymond also explained that after Alice's disappearance, Jessica had proactively come to console him and helped care for Alice's son. However, with their professional intuition, the investigators sensed that behind this seemingly idyllic facade lay a much more complex story. A thorough search of the apartment revealed suspicious findings. In the garage, they found a trash bag containing Alice's clothes, while her entire wardrobe in the bedroom had been cleared out. These details further strengthened the police's suspicion that Raymond was intentionally concealing something about Alice's disappearance. Faced with this situation, the police in charge proposed using a lie detector test, and to their surprise, Raymond immediately agreed. However, the test results showed that he was unable to pass it. Nevertheless, the investigators understood that the lie detector was only a supporting tool in the investigation and could not be used as the sole basis for arresting a suspect. They still needed more concrete and substantial evidence. As time passed, a fateful morning arrived on January 24, 2000 in the desolate desert east of the city of Reno, Nevada. Two mining workers were conducting their routine patrol. As they approached the edge of the desert, they were suddenly gripped by a horrifying sight. A ghastly object partially emerged from the sand. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was a decomposed human body. Overwhelmed by the mob discovery, the two workers immediately reported it to the police. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the scene to investigate and collect evidence. The harsh desert environment had caused severe deterioration of the body. While it was still possible to determine that the victim was female, the face was no longer recognizable. The body was in a truly disturbing state. The scalp was missing, the entire body was severely damaged, and the right breast and a large portion of the abdomen, including the uterus and bladder, had been removed. If this was the work of a human, the level of cruelty was almost unimaginable. However, the autopsy also revealed signs that the body had been attacked by animals. There were clear bite and claw marks. An interesting detail was the position of the victim. Her legs were spread wide, and her feet were pointing towards a cave later identified as a coyote den. Therefore, the police surmised that the missing body parts had likely been consumed by these animals. However, a series of new findings quickly eliminated the hypothesis of a wild animal attack on the victim's body. The police discovered multiple gunshot wounds, and they also found scattered shell casings on the ground around the site. This evidence clearly indicated that this was a homicide, and the location was the original crime scene. During the examination of the crime scene and evidence collection, the investigators also found a noteworthy detail in the victim's clothing: a number of arcade game tokens engraved with the letters NOW and ZOG. The meaning of these symbols remained a mystery to the investigation team. Nevertheless, the pressing issue at the moment was to determine the identity of the victim. Forensic experts estimated, based on the decomposition state of the body, that the victim's time of death was between a few weeks to a few months prior. The police quickly cross-checked missing person report and conducted DNA tests along with dental record comparisons. The results showed that the victim was Alice, and the woman who had gone missing 2 months earlier. Notably, the location where the body was discovered was about 300 kilometers away from Alice's home. The question was, why was she in this remote location, and what had led to her gruesome death? According to the assessment of the lead investigators, the fact that the perpetrator had transported the victim to such an isolated area to commit the murder and dismember the body indicated that this was not a spontaneous act, but rather the result of deep-seated hatred, particularly the distinctive arcade game tokens found around the bore. The noteworthy abbreviations NOW and ZOG, which were identified as shorthand for New World Order and Zionist-occupied government, both organizations associated with white supremacy ideologies. These clues seem to be pointing the investigation towards a racially motivated homicide. Pinal, a city in the East Bay region of San Francisco, California, where Alice resided, is located in Contra Costa County. Although it has a relatively small area of 13.8 square miles, the city has a fairly diverse population. White residents account for over 30%, followed by a significant Asian American community. California is known to have the most severe racial discrimination issues in the United States, with many Crimes targeting Asian Americans. This led the public to question, was Alice's death related to a racial hate crime? However, based on their investigative experience, the seasoned detectives concluded that the signs of racial bias might just be an elaborate attempt by the perpetrator to misdirect the investigation. The autopsy report revealed horrifying details. Alice had been shot a total of 4 times, 2 in the chest, and the remaining 2 in the temple and center of the forehead. Her face had been doused with sulfuric acid, and most shockingly, her uterus had been deliberately removed. This last detail suggested that the killer might have been trying to erase evidence of her pregnancy. So who is the most likely person to have murdered her? The investigators shifted their focus to Raymond, as they had harbored suspicions about him from the very first interview. To uncover the truth, they decided to delve deeper into Raymond's past and his relationship with Alice. Allison was born in China. When she was 3 years old, her family immigrated to the United States, choosing San Francisco as their new home. From a young age, Alice was the pride of her parents. With her outstanding academic achievements, her talent and dedication were demonstrated when she earned admission to the University of California, Davis, one of the top public universities in the U.S. With this prestigious acceptance, a bright future seemed to be awaiting Alice. However, her parents could never have imagined that a romance blossoming during her college years would become the fateful turning point that would change the course of their daughter's life. During her freshman year in college, Alice began dating a young man named Tom, their student. Romance was simple and pure. They were compatible in personality and enjoyed the joys of youth together, hardly ever leaving each other's side. However, a party that Tom took Alice to become a defining moment in her life. It was there that she was captivated by an Asian-looking man. His name was Raymond Wong, a 26-year-old technology consultant. Both Raymond and Alice were immigrants. While Alice's family came from China, Raymond had immigrated from Hong Kong with his parents. Since childhood, their shared experiences of immigrant life created a special bond between them. For a freshman like Alice, the image of the successful tech entrepreneur that was Raymond proved irresistible. It wasn't long before Alice decided to end her relationship with Tom and embarked on a passionate romance with Raymond. Their new relationship had barely progressed when a surprise occurred. Alice discovered she was pregnant. This news was like an earthquake, shaking the burning passion between the two. Alice now faced a life-altering decision. Should she continue on the promising path of her education or step into the role of motherhood at such a young age? After much inner turmoil, Alice made the final decision. She chose to keep the baby. This decision was driven by her deep love for Raymond, as well as her inability to abandon the life growing within her to pursue motherhood. Alice had to put her college dreams on hold. While deeply saddened to see their daughter give up such a valuable educational opportunity, Alice's parents still respected her decision and offered their sincere blessings, for they understood that becoming a mother is a sacred journey for a woman. Afterward, Alice moved in with Raymond and began a new chapter in her life. After the baby was born, she truly became a loving mother. Although she had to care for the child during the day and attend classes at night, Alice felt her life was filled with joy and happiness. As for Raymond, he also demonstrated responsibility, not only providing amply for the small family, but also succeeding in real investment. On the surface, this appeared to be a perfect, happy family. However, a crucial question remained unanswered. When did Raymond start his polyamorous relationship, and what made Alice accept such a compromising situation? Emails extracted from Alice's account gradually revealed a heartbreaking truth, completely contradicting Raymond's claim of a harmonious three-way relationship. The discovered emails painted a very different picture. Alice and Jessica were indeed aware of each other's existence, but they were in fact rivals, not accepting co-wives. The exchanges between them were filled with hatred and vicious attacks, with each woman asserting that she alone deserved Raymond's love. The tragedy became even more bitter when an email from Alice to Raymond was uncovered. It revealed that during the period when Alice was pregnant, when she needed love and protection the most, Raymond had betrayed her by returning to his ex-girlfriend Jessica. The letter expressed Alice's anguished but hopeful plea, begging Raymond to recognize his mistake and come back to care for their unborn child together. However, the subsequent events completely dashed her hopes. Furthermore, in the course of the investigation, the police discovered an intriguing detail. Alice had purchased a $2 million life insurance policy, with the surprising detail that Raymond was the sole beneficiary. This, combined with the pre-existing emotional conflicts, made Raymond the prime suspect in the case. As soon as Alice's body was found, the police immediately sought out Raymond, but they were too late. Raymond and Jessica had already fled to Canada, without leaving any information about when they might return. Armed with a search warrant, the investigators searched the house and made a disturbing discovery. All traces of Alice's presence in the home had been erased. Instead, the place was filled with Jessica's belongings, as if she had quickly taken over the role of the woman in this family. The forensic examination of Raymond's personal computer yielded shocking findings. The technical experts were able to recover deleted data and uncovered a horrifying collection, thousands of hours of snuff films, a genre depicting real-life killings. Most of the victims in these videos were brutally murdered, tortured, and assaulted women, reflecting the severely disturbed mindset of the owner. Furthermore, in the email exchanges between Raymond and Jessica, the investigators found content that further corroborated the motive for the crime. In these messages, Raymond assured Jessica that she no longer needed to harass and threaten Alice, as he would find a way to take care of her. Raymond also advised Jessica to be patient, as if hinting at a pre-planned scheme. By this point, the police were almost certain of Raymond's culpability, when an unexpected development occurred. The media outlets in San Francisco had received an email from the Aryan Brotherhood, a notorious criminal organization in the U.S. that adheres to white supremacist ideology. In the video, they claimed responsibility for Alice's murder. Initially, this information took the investigation team by surprise and caused confusion. However, with their keen professional instincts, they quickly recognized something unusual about this statement. Technical experts were mobilized to trace the origin of the suspicious email. The results they obtained further reinforced the investigators' doubts. Through technical analysis, the police traced the IP address of the email to an internet cafe in Calgary, Canada, the very location where Raymond and Jessica had fled to. These coincidences were clearly not random. The police immediately collaborated with local authorities to investigate and quickly confirmed that Raymond had indeed visited this internet cafe. However, this alone was still not enough evidence to conclusively implicate him in the murder. The story took a new turn when Raymond and Jessica unexpectedly returned to the U.S. The police immediately brought Raymond in for questioning. The two had just registered their marriage in Calgary and returned with a joyful mood, as if unconcerned about Alice's death. During the interrogation, Raymond continued to vehemently deny all accusations of murdering Alice. When confronted about the incriminating emails discussing plans to kill her, he claimed that these were just words to appease Jessica's state of mind. Raymond's stubborn and evasive attitude deeply frustrated the investigators. However, what truly left them powerless was the fact that despite having many circumstantial evidence, they still could not find the final piece to complete the puzzle of Raymond's criminal acts. The question was, when would they find the witness or physical evidence to bring the perpetrator to justice? In the course of the investigation and evidence collection, the police discovered that Raymond's personal computer contained illegal content related to minors. In 2002, although they could not charge him for Alice's murder, they were able to bring him to trial for possession of this material. Raymond did not resist the accusation and received a 2-year prison sentence. After serving his sentence, Raymond continued to live a free life, seemingly unfazed by the past, while the mystery of Alice's murder remained unsolved. However, in 2009, a lapse in judgment landed him back in legal trouble. Raymond had forgotten an important requirement of U.S. law. As a convicted sex offender, he was obligated to perform an annual registration with the authorities. Instead of showing remorse for this violation of the law, Raymond remained defiant. After posting a $100,000 bail to be released, he immediately sought to flee. Soon after, he escaped to China and hid there for 3.5 years to evade the pursuit of the law. During this time, although the police exhausted all investigative measures, they could not find any trace of Raymond, as if he had completely vanished into thin air. Just as the investigators were about to accept that the case would become one of the unsolvable files, an unexpected turning point occurred, and ironically, they had to thank Raymond's own carelessness for this. On December 19, 2011, the lead investigator on Alice's case at the Pinal Police Department received a call from the FBI. They said that Raymond had been detained at San Francisco International Airport for using a fake passport to enter the country. This news nearly caused the officer to jump out of his seat in excitement, and he immediately informed the FBI that he would be there right away. The reason Raymond dared to return to the U.S. was to visit his ailing father. Aware that entering with his real identity was impossible, he hatched an audacious plan to impersonate an international intelligence agent. He even directly contacted the CIA and FBI in Beijing to add credibility to his charade. But unbeknownst to him, his deceptive scheme was detected, and he was apprehended as soon as he was going through the immigration procedures. With a mix of anticipation and tension, the investigators recognized this as a golden opportunity to bring Raymond to justice. They understood that if they failed to find decisive evidence this time, Raymond would once again escape the clutches of the law. With limited time on their hands, the pressure weighed heavily on the investigation team. Could they seize this rare chance? Without delay, the police launched a renewed investigation plan. They focused on a key figure, Jessica Tang, the woman who might hold the secrets of the case. The lead investigator acknowledged that this was the greatest challenge in his career. How could they convince Jessica to reveal the truth after 12 years of silence about Alice's death, especially when time had erased many traces and memories might have faded in the initial interrogation? While clearly exhibiting signs of stress, Jessica remained silent. She appeared quite confident, realizing that the police still did not have the decisive evidence, and tried to evade by asserting that she had long since cut off all ties with Raymond and did not want to be involved in his troubles. However, the persistent interrogation tactics of the police gradually proved effective. After days of continuous meetings and psychological pressure, they made Jessica reconsider her own situation. The investigators skillfully pointed out a terrifying reality. As the only person who knew the truth about the old case, Jessica herself could become Raymond's next victim, as he might kill her to cover up the evidence. In this predicament, cooperating with the police was the only way to ensure her own safety. Jessica could no longer keep this horrific secret any longer. With a trembling voice and a state of panic, she began to recount the details of the fateful trip to the desert, a journey that had ended in a gruesome crime. Everything started on November 21st, 19999. Raymond had driven Jessica and Alice to the remote desert area of Churchill County, Nevada. Raymond had devised an ingenious plan. He made Alice believe that the purpose of the trip was to kill Jessica, but this was merely a well-orchestrated act. In reality, the one Raymond targeted was Alice herself only. Raymond and Jessica knew the truth about this malicious scheme, while Alice was completely unaware that she was heading towards her own demise. Jessica recounted that she was sitting in the back seat, witnessing the intense argument between Raymond and Alice throughout the journey. When the car reached an isolated location far from the main road in the park, Raymond asked Jessica to remain in the vehicle while he and Alice got out to continue their dispute. Just a few minutes later, the tranquility of the desert was shattered by the sound of gunshots, and Jessica witnessed Alice collapsing. But the tragedy did not end there. Raymond returned to the car, dragged Jessica out, and coerced her into becoming an accomplice by shoving the gun into her hand, ordering, "You have to do it too." Faced with this dilemma of no escape, Jessica understood that if she did not comply, she could be the next victim. In a state of panic and sheer terror, she turned away and tremblingly pulled the trigger. Raymond instructed Jessica to return to the car first while he stayed behind alone with Alice's body. What happened next was a horrific scene. As Raymond carried out depraved and brutal acts of mutilation on the victim to cover up his crime, he added the game tokens engraved with the symbols of the white supremacist organization around the body, in an attempt to misdirect the police investigation towards a racially motivated crime. With a detailed confession from Jessica, the police had sufficient grounds to arrest Raymond for murder. The investigation continued to uncover more important clues. They discovered that on the way to the desert, Raymond had stopped at a rest area, and later they found a witness at that location, further corroborating the evidence against Raymond. On May 27, 2015, after 15 long years since the crime occurred, justice was finally served in court. With the irrefutable evidence and testimony, the jury reached the final verdict. Raymond was guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was 50 years to life, ensuring that this brutal killer would pay the price for his crime. As for Jessica Tang, while admitting her role as accomplice in the case, she received a reduced sentence of 5 years of probation due to her severe heart condition. It has been 15 years since Alice's tragic death, and justice has been served. In 2018, Raymond attempted to appeal the sentence, but the court dismissed his request. Now this murderer will have to spend the rest of his life behind bars with no more opportunities to harm any other women. Looking back at this case, the local prosecutor in charge lamented 21-year-old Alice was a warm, loving mother and a grateful daughter. She deserved an extraordinary life. In recent years, we have often heard the term "struck brain." It refers to those who in the throes of love lose their rationality and self-awareness, caring for nothing else. Imagine if at 19 years old Alice had not given up her precious opportunity to study at a top American university for the sake of love. Would she have had a completely different life if she had chosen to leave when she discovered her boyfriend's infidelity? Could she have avoided that fateful journey to the desert? On September 11, 1996, a horrific incident occurred in the Yanggu district of Shanghai, China, and Elementary school teacher named Yang Yia used acid to disfigure the faces of a mother and daughter, leaving the 8-year-old girl completely blind in both eyes. This tragedy stemmed from an extramarital affair, as the victims were the wife and daughter of Su Guiyang's secret lover. Yang Yia was born and raised in an ordinary family in Shanghai. Her parents were just regular workers, but they greatly valued the importance of education. Although their family was not wealthy, Yang's parents were steadfast in supporting their daughter's pursuit of academic studies. Thanks to her tireless studying, Yang was admitted to a local teacher's college. After graduation, she was assigned to teach at an elementary school not far from her home. Even as a respected teacher, Yang maintained a reserved and introverted demeanor. She had few close connections with those around her, including her own parents, due to the psychological and generational gaps this sometimes made Yang feel lonely as she faced her work alone. Fortunately, Yang Yia always fulfilled her teaching duties with a strong sense of responsibility. Her career gradually became more established, and she became a beloved teacher among her colleagues and students. Sometime later, Yang was fortunate to meet Django, the first man in her life. Django was a gentle and attentive man, and he quickly captivated Yang's heart. This was Yang's first experience of romantic love, and she completely fell into Zhang Mo's web of affection. Immersed in the sweetness and happiness of this relationship, Yang and Zhang Yimou made plans to get married. Yang Ong had prepared dreams of a cozy marital life with him. However, for some inexplicable reason, just as they had become very intimate, Zhang Yimou suddenly proposed to end the relationship. This unexpected breakup was like a bucket of cold water, completely shattering the marital dreams Yang had just built. She was wounded and shocked by the sudden action, unable to understand why Zhang Yimou abruptly abandoned her after all they had been through. In the absence of anyone to confide in, the constant emotional turmoil also caused Yang Ong to develop hatred towards Zhang Yimou. After many failed attempts to reconcile, she set fire to the electrical appliances in his home, completely severing ties with him. From this point on, it was clear that although Yang Yia appeared calm on the outside, her inner psyche was far from peaceful, and in fact had become increasingly disturbing. After the collapse of her relationship with Zhang Yimou, Yang gradually regained her composure. In 1991, during a school event, she met Li Chunning, a man with good education, knowledge and vision. In the course of their conversation, Yang quickly became captivated by Li's polite and courteous manner of speaking. After multiple contacts, we also developed feelings for Yang. Soon after, they decided to get married. However, married life was not as sweet as Y had imagined. They often argued over trivial matters in their daily life. These conflicts did not change even after Yang Ong gave birth to a child. Both of her relationships had not turned out as she had hoped, leaving Y frequently discontented but powerless to do anything. Unexpectedly, in January 1996, Yang accidentally encountered her old neighbor Sugu. She was nearly 40 years old, but still had a quite handsome appearance. Although Shu was already married, when faced with Yang's refined demeanor and gentle words, he found it difficult to suppress his excitement, and often hinted at an ambiguous relationship with her. After learning that Yang's marriage was unhappy, Shu felt he had a chance, and later even invited Y to go out with him. During a dance session, both of them were drunk, and in their intoxicated state of amorous passion, Shu took Yang back to his home. At that time, Shu's wife Goose Shopping and daughter Shu Lujun were visiting the paternal grandparents. The man and woman took advantage of this opportunity to cross the line and develop a secret romantic relationship. Shu Gu was a mature and stable man. He could empathize and be tolerant of Yang's stubbornness. Shu's courteous and refined behavior revived Yang's long-suppressed heart compared to the cold and distant attitude of her husband. Li Yang felt that Shu truly understood and cared for her. Gradually, she became immersed in this illicit relationship and realized that she had fallen in love with Shu. Therefore, Yang intended to divorce her husband in order to live with Shu. In her mind, when Shu heard of this intention, he would surely be overjoyed, as he had always shown such deep infatuation whenever they met. However, the unexpected happened. After Yang expressed her desire to divorce, Shu turned pale and refused her request. It was clear that Shu was not ready to abandon his current family and live with Yang as she wished for Shu. Although he no longer had much affection for his wife, they had lived together for many years, and even if they were not lovers, they were still family. He could not easily sever those ties. Moreover, his 8-year-old daughter Lejun was very pitiful, and he absolutely could not abandon her. Additionally, in the past few months of interacting with Yang Ong, he had heard her express extreme and malicious discontent towards her former lover and husband on multiple occasions, making Shu realize that Yang was not as gentle and refined as she appeared on The surface this made him want to end this inappropriate relationship as soon as possible. After Yang shared her intention to live with Shu, he showed great hesitation and refused her proposal. This made her realize that she was only lusting after the pleasure of the illicit relationship with her and did not truly love her or want a long-term commitment. These successive emotional wounds further heightened Yang's mental state of tension. Her hatred gradually intensified. Finally, on August 8th, Shu officially declared the end of his relationship with Yang. He even offered 5,000 yuan as compensation for her. This triggered a furious outburst from Yang. She threatened that she would not let Shu's family live in peace. In the tense atmosphere, they parted ways in discord. After Shu officially ended the relationship with Yang, the two began to argue constantly, even escalating the conflict to the police station and Shu's home. On September 5th, 1996, Yang went to Shu's home and used glass to shatter the window, hoping to create conflict between Shu and his wife. However, the unexpected happened. Shu had already confessed his affair to his wife and been forgiven. When Shu's wife shopping saw Yang's frantic behavior, she did not get into a loud argument, but simply pulled the curtains, ignoring Yang's provocation to stop Yang's harassment. Shu even reported the incident to the party branch at the school, where she worked, hoping they could intervene and persuade Yang to desist. However, this action of Shu only further angered Yang. When summoned to the school to talk, Yang realized that her private matter had been known to the school leadership and her colleagues. She mechanically answered the questions, but internally Yang's rationality was gradually unraveling. Shu later regretted saying Yang Yush was a bomb, and I was the fuse. In fact, the fuse had started hissing from that day. On September 9, 1996, Yang used the pretext of unblocking a toilet to obtain 500 ml of 95% concentrated sulfuric acid from a student's parents. This parent had suggested that Yang could use something else to unblock the toilet, but she insisted on using sulfuric acid. She later divided this acid into 2 portions. September 10th was Teacher Day, which also happened to be Yang Yi's birthday. Normally, this would be a joyful day for an elementary school teacher like Yang. In the afternoon, Yang brought home a bottle of sulfuric acid and a stack of greeting cards. Together with her husband Li Chunning and daughter, Yang read the thank you messages and blessings that the students had written for her. In the evening, Yang took her daughter and other teachers to go out and have dinner. Surprisingly, Li Chunning also showed an unusually gentle side, telling her to come home early so he could cook longevity noodles for her. However, these considerate actions were unable to appease the anger and desire for revenge smoldering within Yang. She had been too deeply wounded by the previous betrayals. Yang knew that Su loved his daughter the most, so she would make him suffer for the rest of his life. She had even written a suicide note in advance to send to her husband Li Chunning. I cannot forgive myself. I must take revenge. I must regain justice from the lecherous beast who deceived and toyed with my feelings, causing him to be tormented by conscience and morality for the rest of his life. I now deeply regret. Why didn't I handle our marital relationship well from the beginning? Why couldn't I be more tolerant and understanding of each other? Please don't let our child come when I'm on trial. She is still young. She won't be able to bear it. On the morning of September 11th, Yang went to Shuli Jun School U, District No. 1 Elementary School in Shanghai. She lied to the school that Su's father had asked to pick up the child, successfully luring Shuli Jun out of the school and taking her to a deserted construction site she had scouted beforehand. There, Yang said in a chilling tone, "Let me wash your hair for you," and then poured a bottle of sulfuric acid from the child's head down. A few minutes later, Yang cycled to Su's home and threw acid at his 36-year-old wife Goose shopping, then quickly fled the scene. During the attack on the mother and daughter, Yang's own hands were also burned by the acid. At 3:00 p.m. that day, after going to the hospital for bandaging, Yang was turned into the authorities by her relatives. At this point, she still did not fully comprehend the extent of the suffering her actions would inflict on the lives of this mother and child for the rest of their days. Due to the direct contact with the highly concentrated sulfuric acid, Shuli Jun ran out to the street calling for help and was taken to the hospital. She suffered severe burns, blinding both her eyes, with her face, body, arms, and legs and genitalia area burned. Over 21% of her total body surface area. Su's mother Goose shopping was burned on her face, upper arms, back, and knees by the high concentration sulfuric acid, covering 7% of her total body area, with the upper and lower eyelids and corneas of both eyes also burned. On October 24th, 1996 Yong Yea's acid attack case that had gripped the attention of Shanghai residents was finally tried at the Shanghai No. 2 Intermediate People's Court when the victims were brought to the witness stand. The heart-wrenching cries of the child shook everyone present. "Why did you want to kill us? How could you be so cruel?" The entire courtroom erupted in furious shouts. The judge had to pound the gavel multiple times to restore order, as people's emotions were highly agitated. The agonizing sight of the child and the mother's screams traumatized all present. Even the reporters at the scene shared that their hands holding the cameras were trembling. The disfigured faces exposed through the trial and the horrific method of injury also drew public attention. After thorough investigation, the criminal charges were clear intentional injury. When the trial began, Yang Yea, the woman who had been the talk of Shanghai for over a month, appeared before everyone. She was short, wearing a small floral blouse, and looked frail in black-framed glasses, almost unrecognizable as the cruel acid attacker. Legally, Yang Yea had surrendered herself, and she also had a young child. In fact, Yang Yea herself was aware of the cruelty of her own actions. She had prepared herself to face the death sentence. On the morning of December 10, 1996 at 9:55 a.m. the Supreme People's Court of Shanghai rejected Yang Yea's appeal for causing injury to innocent victims through vicious means with severe consequences, upholding the death sentence to be carried out immediately. At 10:50 a.m. Yang Yea, wearing a red robe, was escorted to the execution ground with a thunderous gunshot. She used her own life to end the consequences of this extramarital affair. Story 3. The story begins in 1939. Encouraged by domestic policies, many Japanese citizens migrated to islands occupied by Japan to live and work. Among them was 16-year-old Kazuko Higa. She embarked on a long journey from Okinawa, Japan, to Sippin Island with the purpose of seeking refuge alongside her brother. Soon after her arrival, Kazuko found a job as a staff member at a local cafe. Her youth and beauty attracted admiration for many young men. One of them was Shichiga, a young man also from Okinawa. Fortune smiled upon Shoichi, and after pursuing Kazuko, the two began dating. At 18 years old, Kazuko married Shichi. Due to Japan's limited land area, the Japanese government began migrating its citizens and expanding its control over many islands in the Pacific. Shuichi's main role on the island was to oversee the labor of workers. Their married life was initially filled with happiness. In 1944, Shuichi's work responsibilities changed, and he was transferred to Anadahan Island, bringing Kazuko along with him. Joining them was Kikutaro Hiya, a plantation manager. Anadahan Island, part of the Mariana Islands in the Pacific Ocean, is located about 110 m north of Japan. This small oval-shaped island spans approximately 5.6 miles in length, 2.3 miles in width, and has an area of nearly 12.4 square miles. The island is home to a volcanic mountain rising about 2,600 feet above sea level. It is surrounded by large coconut groves that had once been thriving plantations, but were later devastated by typhoons, leaving the economy in decline. At the time, only about 20 native residents remained working on the island. Shuichi's job was to manage and oversee their labor. Not long after they arrived on Anadahan, World War II was nearing its end. Japan was losing its hold on the battlefield, suffering devastating defeats in the Pacific theater. Many islands, initially occupied by Japan, were being reclaimed by U.S. forces. Concerned for the safety of his younger sister, who was still living on a nearby island, Shoichi decided to leave Anadahan to visit her. Tragically, he never returned. At this point, only a few native inhabitants remained on the island. Among the Japanese, only Kazuko and Shuichi's employer, Kikuro, were left. In such dire circumstances, the two grew close and eventually began living together as a couple. However, the tranquility of Anadahan Island did not last before long. The island was bombed by U.S. forces. Kazuko and Kikuto took refuge in the dense forest at the island center and managed to survive. Unfortunately, the bombing left the island's plantations completely destroyed, along with nearly all their daily necessities and supplies. They also lost all communication with the outside world, and Anadahan had truly become an isolated island. Fortunately, about 40 pigs and 20 chickens that they had been raising survived the devastation. These animals became their lifeline, providing them with the means to sustain themselves. By carefully tending to them, they were able to regain some semblance of peace. But their fragile world was short-lived, as something unexpected was about to happen. On June 12, 1944, 4 fishing vessels were attacked by U.S. forces near Anadahan Island. 3 of the boats sank to the bottom of the sea, and the 4th, heavily damaged, sank shortly afterward. Many crew Members perished. One of the boats sank not far from Anatahan Island, prompting the survivors to swim toward it. Eventually 31 people successfully made it to the island. Among them were 10 Japanese Navy sailors and 21 civilian crew members. All were young men, the youngest being only 16 years old. With no boats left, they had no means of leaving and were forced to survive on the island, relying on wild bananas and coconuts to stave off hunger. Initially, the 31 survivors assumed the island was deserted and cut off from the outside world. That changed one day when, while foraging for wild fruit, they encountered Kazuko and Kikuo. Having lived in solitude for some time, the couple was overjoyed to see others. Until then, aside from the two of them, the only other inhabitants of the island were native locals, making communication difficult. Suddenly surrounded by fellow Japanese nationals, it felt like a reunion, with countrymen Kazuko and Kikito enthusiastically helped the new arrivals, sharing food and even tending to their wounds. At first, the 31 survivors split into small groups and settled in different parts of the island. Over time, they grew accustomed to one another and began living together as a single community, including Kazuko and Kikuo. With the increased population, addressing food and clothing needs became a top priority. Before long, they had consumed all the pigs and chickens on the island, leaving only wild fruits, crabs, and other seafood. They also resorted to fishing along the shores to avoid starvation. Once food supplies were stable, they learned to ferment coconuts to produce alcohol. Indulging their human instincts, clothing became a secondary issue. While they initially had clothing, the long duration of their stay caused it to wear out. To address this, they fashioned makeshift coverings from tree bark. In this manner, the 33 inhabitants of the island lived peacefully for over a year. On August 15, 1945, Japan officially surrendered, marking the end of the war. However, the people on Anaheim Island were unaware of this development. The U.S. military later relayed the news to the island's inhabitants, but they dismissed it as an American ploy and refused to leave. As time passed, the native residents gradually departed, leaving only the 33 Japanese isolated on the island. What initially seemed like a peaceful life began to change. The extreme gender imbalance caused most of the men to view Kazuko differently. After all, they were young men brimming with energy. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. To prevent potential disorder, a few wise and kind-hearted individuals proposed that Kazuko and Kikuo hold a formal wedding ceremony in front of everyone. The purpose was clear: to establish that Kazuko was already taken, discouraging any further interest in her. After the wedding ceremony, the couple moved away from the group and began living independently. This approach proved effective, and life on the island returned to a peaceful state as expected. However, this peace was short-lived. In August 1946, the wreckage of a U.S. bomber was discovered on the island. Among the debris were many useful items, including parachutes that could be fashioned into clothing. Additionally, there were 4 damaged pistols and 90 rounds of ammunition. Since some of the island's inhabitants had prior military experience, they were skilled in handling firearms, and ultimately 2 of the 4 pistols were repaired to quality. Among the islanders vanished at this point on this isolated island, power shifted to whoever possessed the guns. The appearance of these 2 functional firearms completely altered the fate of the 33 people on the island. To begin with, let us refer to the 2 individuals who repaired the guns as Yamamoto and Yamaguchi. They quickly established themselves as the leaders of the group. As leaders, they sought to claim the best of everything for themselves. The thing they desired most on the island was Kazuko Higa. Using their guns, Yamamoto and Yamaguchi forced Kazuko and her husband to submit to their demands. Under the weight of this authority, Kazuko had no choice but to endure silently. However, the situation was far from simple. Shortly after the island witnessed it first death, a man fell from a coconut tree and died. Yamamoto and Yamaguchi were the only witnesses. Coincidentally, the deceased had prior conflicts with Yamamoto and others, raising suspicions among the islanders that Yamamoto and Yamaguchi might have been involved in his death. This sparked anxiety among those without firearms, who began to worry about their safety. Yamamoto, however, grew even more arrogant when another man attempted to approach Kazuko Yamamoto and Yamaguchi. She shot him. This act heightened the panic among the rest of the group, as they feared they might be the next targets. At this point, the islanders' focus shifted from Kazuko to the 2 firearms. The atmosphere on the island grew tense and oppressive. If anyone had the most to fear at this time, it was Kazuko's husband Kikuo. He lived under constant surveillance by Yamamoto and Yamaguchi. As a result, Kucho devised a plan. He approached Yamamoto and Yamaguchi, telling them that he no longer wished to live with Kazuko and was willing to leave her to them. Delighted by this offer, Yamamoto and Yamaguchi praised Kikuo for his intelligence. However, no one realized this was part of Kiko's strategy faced with this situation. Kazuko saw things clearly like an outsider observing the unfolding events. Previously, Yamamoto and Yamaguchi, united by their shared possession of firearms, worked together to dominate the others. Now, with both vying to claim Kazuko for themselves, their unity began to falter. Human nature dictated that they would inevitably start competing against each other. This growing tension would likely escalate their rivalry and could eventually turn them into enemies. As expected, it didn't take long before Yamamoto and Yamaguchi fiercely fought over Kazuko. After their conflict, Yamaguchi emerged victorious. In this way, Yamaguchi not only claimed the only woman on the island, but also gained possession of both pistols. This turn of events left everyone else deeply upset and resentful. When the dominance of the strong becomes too evident, it is only natural for the weak to strike back. Yamaguchi believed his days of happiness had arrived, but soon after he met an abrupt end. It was said that he fell into the sea and drowned. However, everyone on the island knew the true cause of his death, but chose to remain silent. The two pistols that had belonged to Yamaguchi then fell into the hands of two others, Nakazawa and Iwai. Like their predecessors, they immediately claimed Kazuko, forcing her once again to serve them. At this point, a vicious cycle began. Life on the island was peaceful for just over a month before trouble erupted. Once more, a conflict broke out between Nakazawa and IW. Following yet another fight, I came out on top, gaining sole possession of both pistols. As before he monopolized Kazuko for himself, the situation was strikingly similar to the previous events, but IW had learned from his predecessor's fate. He became extremely cautious and vigilant in his daily life, fearing that someone might assassinate him at any moment. For 2 years I managed to maintain control. However, as if fate had decided otherwise, I was assassinated 2 years later. Over the following years, the shadow of death continued to loom over Anatahan Island. 3 more men died under various circumstances. In total, 9 people had now perished. While no one openly spoke of it, everyone understood that the deaths were undoubtedly linked to the gun violence. This prompted the remaining survivors to hold a meeting to address the problem. During their discussions, they agreed that the 2 pistols were the root cause of their suffering. To end the cycle of fear and violence, they devised a plan. Kazuko would choose one man to marry, and afterward the 2 pistols would be thrown into the sea, with no weapons, symbolizing power, and Kazuko officially paired with one person. There would be no reason for further conflict. The plan seemed reasonable, and everyone agreed to follow through. However, would this really resolve the underlying issues? In reality, it did not. In the days that followed, for more mysterious deaths and disappearances occurred on the island. The pistols had been thrown into the sea, yet people continued to meet untimely fates. At this point, everyone on the island grew increasingly fearful for their own lives. Within a short span of 5 years, the original group of 32 men had dwindled to just 19 survivors. To address the escalating chaos, everyone was forced to convene for another meeting. During their second discussion, they concluded that the root cause of the killings was greed. With the gun's symbols of power gone, the men determined that the only remaining source of conflict was their desire for the only woman on the island. This, they believed, was the sole reason for the turmoil. Ultimately, they made a drastic decision to eliminate Kazuko. They believed this was the only way to eradicate their desires and restore peace to the island. After reaching an agreement meant they planned to carry out the assassination the next day. However, that evening, a man who deeply loved Kazuko warned her of the plan. Upon learning the truth, Kazuko fled into the forest. During the night, using her survival instincts, she managed to stay hidden in the mountainous terrain, eking out an existence among the island's crevices. The island, spanning nearly 12 square miles and covered in dense forest, made it difficult for the men to locate Kazuko quickly. In June 1950, on the 33rd day of her escape, Kazuko spotted a U.S. warship anchored near the shore. Desperate, she climbed a tree, removed her clothing, and waved frantically. While shouting for help, her actions caught the attention of the U.S. military, and she was rescued at last. Kazuko escaped the grim confines of the island. After hearing her detailed account, the U.S. military informed the remaining Japanese on the island that the war had ended. Still, they refused to believe the news, suspecting it was a trap set by the Americans. Kazuko returned to Japan and relayed the information that survivors remained on the island, notifying their families. The families of the men who refused to leave began writing letters to assure their loved ones that the war had ended and urging them to come home. Over 200 letters were sent to the island, but the men continued to insist it was an American ploy and refused to leave. On June 26, 1951, one man on the island became convinced that a letter he received was written by his wife. Due to her unique handwriting, trusting its authenticity, he persuaded the others to accept reality. They had lost the war. The group surrendered to the U.S. military and was rescued from the island. They were first taken to a U.S. military base in Guam, and then returned to Japan. Having been missing for so many years, most people had assumed these men had died in battle. As a result, many of their wives had remarried, including Kazuko's former husband Shirchi Higa, who was now in a happy new marriage. When asked by the media about the fate of the 13 men who did not return, the survivors gave inconsistent accounts, arousing suspicion. The truth only came to light when one survivor, under immense pressure, could no longer conceal the facts. It was revealed that the men had killed each other over their rivalry for one woman. The media widely reported the story, turning Kazuko Higa into the center of public attention and an infamous figure in Japanese society. She was given numerous nicknames by the press, such as the Queen of Anadahan Island, the woman with 32 faces, the Queen Bee, and the woman who enchants men. Although some media outlets expressed sympathy for Kazuko, acknowledging that she had no choice but to endure humiliation and compromise in such circumstances, the majority of the media showed disdain and condemned her. The case of Kazuko became a highly controversial topic in Japanese society at the time. Later, Kazuko was invited to play the lead role in the theatrical production Island of Anadahan. Beginning in 1952, she toured the country for 2 years. In 1953, the events on Anadahan Island were adapted into a film titled The Saga of Anadahan. The movie partially reenacted the true story of Kazuko Higa, and she also portrayed herself in the film. Kazuko's acting career lasted a few years, but she was unable to continue on this path. Eventually, to make a living, Kazuko worked as a dancer in Tokyo at the age of 30. Before she remarried, she and her husband opened a small shop and began a modest new life together. Unfortunately, her happiness was short-lived, as her husband passed away when she was in her early 40s. In March 1974, Kazuko died of a brain tumor at approximately 50 years old, marking the end of her tumultuous life. The Anadahan Island incident, though confined to a single island, reflected broader issues inherent in human society. When human morality is no longer restrained by law, primitive survival instincts resurface. In such an environment driven by collective circumstances, the balance between the animal and human sides of individuals becomes difficult to maintain, and personal choice is often overridden by external forces. As for Kazuko, it is clear that she deserves our empathy. Despite continued criticism from some media, the reality was that she was a vulnerable individual subjected to power and violence. She had no viable option but to comply and endure. In truth, Kazuko was simply a woman trying to survive under extreme conditions where all moral and societal norms had completely collapsed. Let's continue with a case that occurred in the Abra district of Chota, Tokyo, Japan. Akihabara is well known for its numerous maid cafes, which have become a signature attraction in the area. In addition to these, one of the popular services in Japan is ear cleaning. Ear cleaning technicians in these establishments are often young, attractive women. They welcome guests dressed in yukata, a traditional Japanese outfit. Upon entering the shop, customers are taken to a small room with tatama mats. The staff dressed in yukata kneel on the floor, while the customer lies on the tatama mat with their head resting on the technician's lap. The technician